This time on Filmmaker, we are looking at Walt Disney Animated Studios films from the 90s. After only releasing 5 films in the 1980s and facing growing competition from the likes of Don Bluth and Studio Ghibli, Disney came into the 90s motivated to climb back on top, and what resulted was what is commonly known as the Disney Renaissance. The 90s had 9 films that all hit at the box office, and mostly with critics as well, including some of the famous studio's most beloved movies of all time. So let's take a look and count them down. Number 9, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Heavy religious themes and kids' movies are not a good fit, especially when tied to this extremely dark book by Victor Hugo, which was chopped up and sparkled to the point of losing all purpose or artistic merit. Plus, the songs, which sound a little bit too close to Les Mis B-sides, are flat across the board. Hunchback does have some terrific animation, and there is a solid performance from Kevin Kline, who's by far the most interesting character in the film, but this movie is about as much fun as Sunday school in summer. Number 8, Pocahontas. There's obviously a lot of conversations to be had about certain aspects of the plot and the age gap and the relationship between the real-life characters it's based on, Mel Gibson. But let's just focus on the movie for what it was at the time. And on the plus side, it's got a couple memorable songs, supporting role from Christian Bale, and what's weirdly close to his actual Cockney accent. The villain's certainly villainous, and it eschews the usual perfect Disney ending for something that's got a little bit more weight. But if we're honest, there's something half-cooked about all of it. Partly it's the animation with those flat, static backgrounds. Partly it's how small the world feels. Partly it's the clumsy story. And compared to most of the solid 90s Disney fare, this one has not aged particularly well. Number 7, Rescuers Down Under. This one is the least like the rest of the films on this list, coming 13 years after the first Rescuers film. Down Under's a throwback to classic Disney style and animation. While it's interesting to have a film set in Australia, and comedy legend Bob Newhart is as likable as ever as the always reluctant but brave Bernard, Rescuers Down Under feels a little bit too much like the original. John Candy as Wilbur the Albatross is a great addition, and it's still kind of charming in its simplicity, but this movie would have had a much more interested audience if it would have been released about a decade earlier. Number 6, Tarzan. The final film Disney put out in the 90s might be the most visually stunning of the bunch. It's still one of the best combinations of hand-drawn 2D and CGI, with vine surfing scenes being an obvious highlight. The one misstep is the soundtrack. Disney works best when the songs are part of the story and the characters' voices are at least in the voices of their singing doubles. Tarzan, however, goes all in on the most Disneyfied version of Phil Collins, which I imagine gets very samey even for people who are fans of that sort of thing. Story's fun though, and it moves quickly, and it does most things pretty well. It's forgettable, but it's a good time while you're watching. Number 5, Mulan. Mulan is one of the more serious films of Disney's Renaissance period, or at least one of the better serious films. At the time, it was a bit of a surprise from the studio, a historical adventure set in feudal China with a female warrior lead. Nowadays, it doesn't seem like that big a deal, but in 1998, Mulan was kind of groundbreaking, and yes, there is some humor in Eddie Murphy's Mushu and some of the more hapless warriors, but Mulan's at its best when the title character's fighting Huns and taking names. And though the soundtrack isn't as catchy as many during the decade, it does have a voice of its own, and there are a few hidden gems. Number 4, Hercules. Hercules sometimes gets overlooked because it's a bit lighter than many of the others in this impressive 90s list, but just because it's fun doesn't mean it's not great. James Woods' slick LA slimeball version of Hades is delightfully evil. The R&B version of the Greek chorus is clever, and the whole classic Hollywood mixed with mythology thing works so well. Phil is the trainer/agent, Meg is the femme fatale with a lot of moxie, and Herc is the wide-eyed cornbread hero. It's all fun and funny and deceptively smart. Hercules is one that you liked as a kid, but you will love as an adult. Number 3, Aladdin. Aladdin might not be the deepest or the most technical Disney film of the 90s, but it sure is great to watch. It's a rag-to-riches underdog story with a lovable scamp, a romantic love story, and one of the most loved comedic sidekicks ever at its center. The songs, the final work by a legendary duo, Menken and Ashman, are catchy enough to carry a Broadway musical. One Jump Ahead, Never Had a Friend, Prince Ali, A Whole New World. It's a sing-along masterpiece. Jafar's a very cool evil wizard. Even non-speaking characters like Raja and Abu are interesting. It's quick, bright window into the gorgeous world of Arabian Nights. Number 2, Lion King. Lion King is one of those undeniable cultural touchstones. At the time, it was the most successful animated film of all time, a mantle that has now been taken up by its 2019 remake. On paper, it's a bit of a surprise hit, a kids' movie loosely based on Hamlet, but to its credit, it takes just enough to help build the bones and inspire a memorable villain and a couple of great sidekicks, but it knows when to veer out and do its own thing. Visually, it's memorable. Musically, it's one of Disney's biggest successes. Tonally, it mixes light and dark in a way that keeps kids' attention, but feels grown up. And together, the package has been capturing imaginations for 2.5 decades. Number 1, Beauty and the Beast. Little Mermaid kind of kicked off what is now known as the Disney Renaissance 2 years earlier, but Beauty and the Beast is the one that sealed the deal and firmly put the House of Mouse back on top. The phrase timeless classic gets used a little bit too easily, but this film is the definition. The songs are phenomenal. The 5th or 6th best song in this film could be the showcase piece of most other Disney films. The story's interesting and layered with complicated characters who all have their own arcs, and the animation changed the course of animation. The 3D ballroom scene blew away early 90s audiences and showed studios what was possible. Belle kind of set the framework for future heroes like Anna and Elsa, the palace staff / furniture, the ultimate supporting cast, and Gaston is perhaps the most entertaining villain in the Disney roster. There's a reason this was the first animated film ever to be nominated for Best Picture, and in another year, it probably would have won. And that is it. I know all of these have their fans. It was Disney's most successful decade after all, so I'd love to hear about what you might move up or down or what you'd swap it out for. And as always, do like and subscribe, and hopefully I will see you all next time.